It's a little bit after 6 p.m. We have 3 members here in body and 2 in voice. So we will convene the meeting with all members present. And at this time, I'll turn it over to our city manager and finance director for presentation.
Thank you, Mayor. Before we start, I'd like to introduce a couple of people, their first meeting tonight. Mr. Patrick Kelly, our new assistant city manager, is here tonight.
Welcome, Patrick.
And also, I saw him a minute ago, Mr. Mike Beavers, our new deputy chief in the police department.
Oh, there he is over in the corner.
So, their first meetings. And
Great.
So I'd like to welcome them here. This is your second work session in a series of work sessions and meetings and hearings to adopt the fiscal year 2018 budget. And if you'll recall, your first work session was on March the 27th. And the purpose of this work session is to catch you up on what has happened since the 27th, and then also to help prepare you for your special meeting on the July 24th, where you'll set the tentative millage. Now, tonight's focus is going to be on the general fund because of its direct relationship to the millage. We always spend the first part of the budget season focused on the general fund, but we don't forget about our special revenue funds and our enterprise funds. We have them catch up to us in August, in the August work session, and then as well as in the public hearings in September. This budget has been a challenge. However, I'm happy to report to everyone that it is balanced. And I want to give a special thank you to our directors, our budget team, our managers, our supervisors, and our administrative assistants, because they all had a hand in preparing this budget. It was truly a team effort. And I also want to give a special recognition to Mr. Boop and Ms. Jones. This was their first budget, and they have put in countless hours preparing this budget. It has pushed their creative talents to their limits, and you saw the passion come out many, many times. I spent many meetings with them, and you saw their passion, and I want to thank them for their good work. And Mr. Boop has a brief presentation for you tonight, and I'll turn it over to him.
Well, thank you, Brian, for that introduction. Just a really quick review of some of the things that we've already discussed. We're projecting this year an increase in the general fund total revenues of approximately $535,000. The two major components to that are an increase to the ad valorem revenues of $888,000, which does include the GO bond savings added over into the operational component of the ad valorem taxes. We're also projecting an increase in the utility taxes this year of approximately $107,000. The rest of the revenue items that you see there represent decreases to the revenues as a whole. Therefore, our total increase in the general fund right now that we're recognizing is $535,000. One of the things that we did this past year, Kelly, if you can go back to the previous screen, one of the things that we did this year is we utilized GFOA's best practices. We took a very close look at our revenue trends, and we saw some decreases in our revenue trends this year, so that's why you see the decreases in some of those numbers. The big decrease in the charges for services of $353,000 is directly related to, and we discussed this in our individual meetings, SD quality control. And so we don't anticipate those kinds of revenues this year, so we included that as a decrease in our overall budget for this year. Going on to the next slide. When we developed our budget this year, we asked ourselves, what are the overall obligations that we have to take care of, that we have to fund in the general fund? And we split those up into the components that are necessary to create the budget as a whole. We have required obligation to the public safety bargaining units. And so we included those contractual increases into the baseline budget. We also have to fund overtime, which is related to public safety, recreation, and public works. We have some partially funded positions this year. One of them is the assistant city manager, which will be fully funded next year, the IT director, which will be fully funded next year. So we had to bring those into the budget process as if they will be fully funded next year. One of the key things that we did is we maintained the fiscal year 2016-17 overall service levels, and we did that with an overall decrease in the total operating expenditures of approximately $60,000. I can honestly say to you the budget process was relatively quick this year because when we looked at the budget, there really wasn't that much to cut. However, your directors found an additional $60,000 that we could cut when we went through the process this year. We funded the increase in general liability and also health insurance. We funded the vehicle replacement program. And we also maintained our 15% fund balance policy. In fact, we did a little bit better than that this year. What we're recommending, we haven't made it part of policy yet, but what we're recommending is that we migrate towards the GFOA best practices in fund balance by establishing a minimum fund balance of 16.67%. So when you sum all that up, this is where we started. We started with an increase in revenue of $535,000. We started with a decrease in overall expenditures of $650,000. We had an increase in transfers out of the general fund this year of $1.4 million. So the net of it all is an increase in the use of fund balance of $228,000. So that's a shortfall. On June 6th this year, we met with the individual department directors, and we had a strategy session. And we said, what are the things that you absolutely must accomplish in the next year? So we took a day, we had a retreat over at Center Lake Park, and these are the things that we came up with. We came up with a list of recommended revenues that we have to fund the priorities that they came up with during that strategy session. So when we met with each of you, we talked about the additional revenue sources that we felt that we would obtain throughout the next year, one of which is the recognition in additional state revenues. Right now, as we speak, we're up approximately $150,000 in additional state revenues. The one component that we have not collected yet is the communication services tax. The communication services tax has been relatively unstable over the last several years due to revenue reductions in taxes, as well as a migration from the sources of taxes from which they derive their revenues. So we're hopeful at the end of the process that we get at least a $75,000 increase in state revenues, but we hope for more. We are recommending a decrease in the dependent care coverage next year, which would right now equate to $86,000. We're recommending that the CRA contribute back to the general fund their portion of debt related to the completion of Center Lake Park. We're also recommending small increases from the utility funds of $136,000 from the water sewer utility and another $26,000 from the stormwater utility. We're recommending an additional one police officer next year, which we'll talk about in just a minute. And the source to cover that police officer in the next fiscal year will either be police impact fees or forfeiture funds. Following next fiscal year, that will be directly paid out of the general fund. We're projecting revenues next year from the building fund. That is one of the revenue sources that we actually decreased on the first slide. We don't actually know what the revenue sources are going to be from the building fund next year, so we're using those this year to fund the capital requests and or facility maintenance expenses. When you add all these things together to cover the priorities that the directors recommended, we're coming up with a net use of fund balance above our target of 16.67% of approximately $329,000, almost $330,000. The total revenue sources that we have identified so far this year in this budget process is $1,078,000. These are the list of priorities that we came up with. We are recommending a 3% salary increase for all employees. We're recommending a continuation of the market adjustments for employees that we started last year. We will actually incur a reduction of $40,000 in expenses transferred over to the technology fund from the EPIC study. We're recommending additional personnel requests, and some of these requests they're all the low-hanging fruit. Some of them are just small salary increases to bring them up from to either increase their hours or also adding in a new police officer. We're recommending to you a new administrative person over in Fleet, and we're also recommending to you a new recreation coordinator. We have capital requests of $79,000, which are primarily related to public safety. We need to upgrade the mobile equipment that is in each of the fire trucks. We also need to procure some SRT vests, and we need to provide some ballistic armor for the fire personnel. Facilities maintenance request, $251,000. That is primarily related to two items. We need to upgrade the air handler in this facility here, City Hall, and we also need to upgrade the air handler over in the annex building. Just two items, $251,000. When you add those items together, they sum to $844,000. Together with the net operating loss that we started off with from our obligations of $228,000, we have a small amount of money to place in our contingency. Total expenditures of $1,078,000 equal the total revenue sources from the previous slide. We are presenting to you a balanced budget, as Mr. Cobb stated in his opening remarks. With that, I will open it up for any questions.
Great, thank you, Mr. Boop. We do appreciate it. Mr. Cobb, do you have anything to add?
No, ma'am.
Did our folks on the phone hear all of that?
I heard it okay.
Keith?
I'm good, thanks.
All righty. We were worried about you there. Bob, do you have any questions?
I've got a couple questions, and some of them stem back to our individual meetings. One of them was, this is very creative and it works for this year, but I'm concerned with the next few years going forward, trying to maintain a balanced budget, and I'm trying to smooth any kind of issues that we may see going forward. So I've got that issue, and then the other issue I had has to do with the personnel request. There was a personnel request for development services, and given the amount of growth that we're seeing in the city, I felt like that was a personnel request that we need to take a second look at as well.
Was that cut out, Bob? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. Did you get that, Mr. Boop?
Yes, sir.
And so I think, with the trying to levelize and look at the city's budget going forward, there was some different recommendations on how to do that, and I think that we need to really take a look at that and consider kind of adding a little bit more of a revenue source for this year to smooth that out going forward.
All righty. Anything else, Bob?
I think that's all I had.
All righty, Keith, we'll go over to you since you guys are on the phone. Brayton? Keith?
We're probably still on mute. Or he's on mute.
You guys talking to me?
Yes, I was. You're up. Any questions?
Let me defer for about 10 minutes till I can get off the road. It's hard to talk while I'm driving.
Oh, okay, you're driving. All righty, we'll come back to you then. All righty, we'll go over to Megan.
Well, it sounds like Bob's thinking raise taxes to cover everything, but it seems like whenever we need to find money, we can find it in the sewer and water funds and stormwater. So if we were able to have excess of it, something like $2 million or so, $2.2 million to spend on a golf course, I think it would make sense to revisit that versus raising taxes. If that's is that kind of what you were thinking, Bob? To raise taxes or find money somewhere else to fund it? Because I had the same response with development services. Seems like
I think it could require a small increase as opposed to, because if you look going forward, if we don't do something right away, especially if this homestead exemption passes, which I think everybody thinks it will, we're gonna find ourselves needing a larger increase going forward. If we try to smooth that out year over year, it's not going to impact the citizens as much.
All righty, thank you, Bob. Megan?
I don't know. I think doing it sooner just it does it sooner. Then the city collects more money sooner. We could always make a big wish list and just raise the taxes and do whatever. But we've been doing some things that are. We've got to answer to the taxpayers for a golf course and a lot of the money that's gone into that. So if we're raising millage to do essential services, well, I consider development services an essential service, it kind of begs the question why we didn't, when we were able to reallocate $2 million, why we did not fund essential services instead of a recreational element.
Well, it's my understanding, and I'll allow staff to answer, that money can only be used for certain things, and general fund isn't one of them. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Are you saying that we cannot use excess money from the water sewer fund or the stormwater utility for the general fund, but we can use it for a golf course?
Well, you keep saying golf course, and Councilwoman, we know you don't like the golf course.
Okay.
Everybody gets that, so you
Okay.
can stop saying.
Well, no, but I mean, like, we're using it
You do
to
realize-
fund the golf course, to fund the operations. It's not for the stormwater aspect of it. That part I understand. So there's only maybe 800,000 or something that's for the operation.
You do realize that the amenity that we added also generates revenue.
But we don't know how much. That's what I'm hoping. I'm hoping to see a positive stream and a greater return on that investment than the other Parks and Rec things.
That's the goal that you keep forgetting, though.
Oh, I
Don't
get it.
forget that
I
goal.
get it.
We understand you
But
don't like
but
it.
you see where I'm coming from, though, on raising taxes when we pulled out of thin air.
They're different funds. But
But they're not different funds.
Right. That's one of the questions that Mr. Pollock raised in our individual meetings as well. And we have talked to our financial services folks, Wilden, and they recommended that over the next year, we have to do a rate study anyways, because it's been so long since we've done one. And what they're concerned about is that with the growth that has occurred in the city, that the rate tiers that we currently have may need to be realigned because of how the revenue components fit within those tiers. And with that in mind, what they recommended is that we take a close look at our administrative services that the general fund actually provides to the utility, because we don't know if that's in line or not, okay? There may be room to increase it. We're not really sure. So they have a rate model that they can give us that allows us to go back, analyze all the services that we provide to the water sewer fund, and if we find, in fact, that we can accommodate an increase through that mechanism, then we can. One of the things that we need to be careful about when it comes to providing services from the general fund or making contributions to the general fund, or any fund for that matter, is we have to make sure that we adhere to our bond covenants. And we need to take a close look at what of the decisions that we make and how that impacts us over time. So the long answer to your question is yes, it probably could be done, but not without a degree of analysis.
But even on the slideshow you just showed, we're moving over a small amount, or less than 200,000 each, from the
Right.
water sewer and from the stormwater to the general. So
Right.
we are charging enough to have excess. And even after having taken quite a bit of I don't know if excess is the right word, but
Yeah, I don't think it's excess.
Yeah, it's
If I remember
something
doing
if-
this from our last rate analysis, folks, we can only, and it was Benkovsky who was the one who really put this in place, we can only recoup out of those funds direct cost to the general fund. Because
Correct.
you used to treat, we used to joke about it all the time, you used to pay half employees, half out of general fund,
Correct.
half out of the water fund, and so on and so forth, because that's the money you see coming back in, whatever the costs are to provide the employees, the employee benefits, the
Correct.
vehicles, the whatever gets bought out of the general fund for those services that we can charge to that fund is what we see coming back to the fund.
That's correct.
Not just we decide, we want $100,000.
The recommended increase that you see is a very small increase, and I believe that it is okay. It's within standard. I don't think that it's out of line for the services the general fund does provide on behalf of the utilities. But again, what we need to do is we need to meet with Willdan, get their model in place so that we can determine just exactly what the costs are associated with providing those services to the general fund.
What was the name of the last consultant that we had who did it? Robert?
We've never had an analysis of the administrative services.
Ori. Didn't Ori do something like that, though, for us at one point in time?
I'm not aware of that.
Right.
I'm not aware of how the model was built.
Okay. That was before your time. That was
before my time.
That was when Bob was here, Minkowski.
Probably. But nonetheless, that model needs to be put in play. We plan on doing that over the next year.
Could you help me better understand the $340,000 that moved? I think it was from the water sewer to go towards the purchase. Was it the purchase price or towards the operational part of the golf course? Because my understanding from council's consensus that night was that was not going to be a loan. That was a gift from water sewer to the operational, continued operational through the rest of the... I'm just trying to understand what the policy is. So that's what I'm asking for clarification. Either we can take the extra because it's profitable, or we only can take what the administrative actual costs that the general fund uses are, and it's unclear to me what we're doing.
There can be abuse in transferring funds without a defined methodology to other funds. The amount that we transferred from stormwater over to the Gulf Utility Fund was $321,000 to cover the first year of operations. That was their operational loss. That was their expected operational loss. That amount was transferred out of stormwater.
That was transferred out of water sewer. It was $500,000 transferred out of stormwater.
$500,000 was transferred out of water sewer into stormwater to help fund with the purchase of the golf course.
Correct. So the $500,000 that was stormwater, that went towards the purchase, which fulfills the purpose for which the bonds were issued. So that makes sense. But the $340,000 additional that was necessary to cover the operational losses, that was not for anything that has to do with water sewer, and it was also not related directly to anything that the general fund or the general city administration provided to water sewer. So that's the portion, the $321,000 that you're referencing.
The $321,000 was transferred. Kelly, am I right in saying that the $321,000 was transferred from stormwater to the golf course enterprise fund, or was that out of the water sewer utility? Okay.
Yeah, we'll get that answer. Let's stick to the slides.
That's just a better understanding how many can move, so we can be creative if we need to.
We gotta have an understanding. It's not an issue.
Mayor?
Yes, of course.
I've been putting some thought into this ever since Mr. Pollack raised the issue regarding the planning tech position. I've been mulling over some various alternatives that I haven't had a chance to talk to Mr. Boop and Ms. Jones about. I was going to ask if possibly I could bring something back to you on the 24th to address it. I may not be able to find the funding for it, but I've got some ideas that maybe we can do something. But I'd like to sit down with them first and get their input on it. And so it would help me out if I could bring something back to you on the 24th.
I don't think there's any objection to any changes or different ideas from the input that you receive from each and every one of us. Councilwoman, anything else?
No.
No? You good? Mm-hmm. Councilman? Deputy Mayor, excuse me. Steve?
Thank you, sir. Look, there is no crystal ball for any budget. I've heard two of my colleagues voice some concerns about the next couple years, and with the additional homestead, look, we know we're going to have some challenges the next couple years, but the way I approach each year is, do we have it covered? We have everything paid for. We have a balanced budget. We're not raising the millage rate, and we can't fix it all now. The next couple of years is going to be tough, and there will be options in the next couple of years for us to take, and if they're drastic, then we'll take them. But I look at it from year to year. If you try, I mean, it's always good to have some long-term planning, but right now, for this year, there's still a lot of unknowns out there. We don't know how that vote's going to go. I suppose it will pass. Most people here, I'm going to save taxes. But as we talked about in the individual meetings, there are other options for other revenue sources that we can look at, that we spoke about. So, I mean, I don't see the alarm this year. I think you guys did a great job. I'm not going to change anything. I did say in our meetings, though, that some of these, for lack of a better word, niceties that we're doing, we've been through the dark years before Megan came and Bob came. I mean, there were some times when we made a lot of cuts, and then we're starting to rebuild them. And if we don't start to rebuild them, a.k.a. Pay raises for our employees, what happens is what happened in 2005 when I got here. We had all our public safety people being trained by the finest people you could ever have here in Oviedo. They got all trained. Wow, this is great. And they left. Then we had to bring on new people, and it cost us more than if we would have just paid them correctly. And, I'll use the public safety as a great example. We have paid them where they have to be. It took a couple years to get us where we needed to get with them. But now when we have a position, like for a firefighter, we get 100 applications for one, opening. So some of these things that some may want to cut, if you don't do them, you wind up with other expenses. So I would just caution my colleagues, we're balanced. The budget looks great. You guys did a great job. The concerns definitely recognized from Bob and what Megan said, but we got to address them when they come. And we have lots of tools to do it, but we don't have to fix the next 5 years right now. So I think that we just march on with this budget. We see how things go. We will have a much better picture this time next year how the golf course is doing. Okay, we'll know how that's going. I suppose Nick Company will have the place humming because I hear only good things. And then that'll become, I think, a revenue source that none of us really expected to have. And I think eventually you're going to say, this is pretty cool.
I'm hoping to say that soon. I think it is pretty cool already. So.
It's gonna get there. So, I mean, I don't think we chop this up and we don't dice it like we have. I mean, Jerry, you weren't here in the Benkovsky years, but we used to sit here. Brian, you were here. Let's cut this. Let's cut that. Let's cut. It was a big mess. So my question is, we have a balanced budget, correct?
Yes, sir.
We funded all the things that you showed us, and we're good for this year. As the problems develop, and now we have Patrick on board, he's got a lot of tools to look into the crystal ball from his past history. Others will know, within a few months what we have to do for next year, but I wouldn't pick it apart. Good questions from you, good questions from Bob, but let's ride with it. That's how I'm approaching it.
Mr. Mayor, I like the idea of riding with it, but there is one thing that is kind of a problem. I was talking with Mr. Boulware before the meeting. We've won some grants, and if we don't use them, we lose them, and then we look stupid for having accepted grants and sought them out and earned them and being unable to cover our match. Some of them, they have time limits. I understand it's like 3 years is a pretty common amount of time, and we are in our last year on some of these. So I was marking up the CIP and trying to figure out, which things go where and why are they here. And
to be honest, I'm unaware of any grants that we're not using.
Maybe you could.
Are there grants we're not using, Mr. Cobb?
We've had some issues as far as some local matches on some of our FERDAP grants.
Well, that Councilwoman's right.
We need to figure out how to use them if we want to prioritize that. One of them is reworking fields, and maybe Mr. Boulware can hop up here and explain some of the things.
We have the finance folks.
Finance, okay.
Yeah, let me comment on that. Well, one of the things that we tried to do, backing up to the slide presentation, is we really tried to employ as many of the GFOA best practices as we possibly could. So we wanted to get away from revenues that we absolutely could not depend on year over year, such as SD quality control, because they're non-recurring. And we took a very conservative approach to the budget process this year. So as such, we didn't touch some of the impact fees that have normally been used to fund other components of the general fund budget. So what we're looking at doing over the next year is using those revenue sources that come into impact fees to help match up some of the grant obligations that you're speaking to. In addition to that, I've asked Mr. Wyatt to take a look at the third-gen sales tax items, because in a research of state statute, we found that we could use third-gen sales tax for revenue, for recreation items, recreation capital. So we're looking at proposing a change to some of the sources that we receive on a temporary basis to use for those recreation purposes to match the grants that we need to get.
How many grants are out there that way?
3, to my knowledge.
Well, guys, that's an issue that should be brought to all the council.
I'm sorry?
That's an issue that everybody here should have been aware of. I mean, I commend the councilwoman for finding out about it and bringing it to our attention, but it's not her job to bring that to our attention.
Understood.
All right, because by us not using those grants is hamstringing us for applying for more.
Understood.
All right. Well, as long as we're working towards a goal, because that is concerning.
Jerry, do you know
We're
how
working
much,
towards a solution.
do you know how much these 3 grants, forget the match, but what the total grants
Probably
are?
about
Do we-
600,000,
do we know?
right?
Exactly,
I'll
the
bring out
600,000.
Yeah.
So we would need
See?
600,000 in matching.
So we
We've
can
got
match
to
it.
front it first, and then we get reimbursed, I think is how it works.
That is
Yeah,
correct.
that's how it works.
Okay, so we've got to find, I don't like the idea of us maybe getting an extra 600 grand of revenue, and maybe we get to use the grants. I'd rather kind of rearrange and say, well, what could we push off, like the air handler? It's
Is
not
it just,
dead yet.
is it just the lack of, Brian talked about there were some issues, is it just the lack of funds to match them, or were there issues with the grants? Were there problems with the paperwork?
Oh, no, there's no
It's-
problems with the grants.
Yeah, because...
It's just that we're in
as the
a
mayor-
3-year cycle.
As the mayor talked, I mean, grants is just like, that's free money, and honestly, I'm going to agree with
Free
you.
money.
We might have to find a way. You don't want to leave $600,000 for free dollars out there. So, Brian, if you could take a look at that maybe for the next meeting, maybe there is some choice. I mean, because you give that up, and then it's like a terrible syndrome. Now you need the $600,000 that you lost just to do what you wanted to do.
Well, they're working on something, so
Right.
let's not hammer.
Yeah, we're working
2
on a
weeks from
solution.
now.
Yeah, so you'll let
But
us...
by the end of
These
the
are
budget
the-
season, let's know how we're going to do it.
In all honesty, these are things that we uncovered when we went through the budget process this year that we weren't previously made aware of.
So you got some time, though.
So this was,
Whose responsibility is it to make us aware of it?
this first year was discovery. So,
That's mine.
Okay, you're going to fall on the sword.
Yes.
Okay. That's admirable of you. All right, there's a problem, we need to address it.
yes, sir.
Air handler, now we replaced the chillers out there.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that is a good point. I mean, does 2 air handlers need to be replaced this year if the chillers have just been replaced? I mean, I realize they're 25 years old and held together with bubble gum and spit
bands.
and rubber bands, and I get it.
The Rude in the attic stays, and the new Goodman's outside.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
What about power bills? I'm always cold in here. Could we tinker with the power, or the air,
Actually,
or is that like really messing with health and
That's actually a
safety?
Siemens thing that we
Is it?
get.
Okay.
We get rebates, and
That's
Okay.
that's a whole
that's
program.
a whole nother,
Someone's watching it,
yeah.
guaranteeing us savings and income and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Siemens.
Talk to Councilman Britton, or Mr. Cobb probably has that Siemens study. It was pretty fascinating to read.
Yeah, I remember that in the talk about doing the big deep well thing that ended up at the Aquatic Center.
Right.
Cool stuff.
Right.
All righty. Councilman Britton, are you back yet? Keith?
I am here.
Do you have any questions based on the discussion we've heard before I throw in my 2 cents?
Yeah, if you can give me a few seconds. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
I just wanted to say good job to Jerry and Kelly for the briefing today, and they gave me another briefing last Wednesday, that really laid the groundwork for this discussion, so I appreciate that. And I understand, I think I heard that Mr. Patrick's on board already. I just want to welcome him aboard while I'm got the floor here.
Welcome, Patrick. You can say hello to him.
Hey, Patrick. Okay, I got a few comments. One, I'm really glad to see we're balancing the budget this year. We're maintaining our 15% reserve, which we have to do, but we're doing that without a lot of pain. That wasn't always the case. One thing I am really happy to see is this ratio of residential revenue versus commercial revenue is starting to balance out. Brian, what are we at? About 60% residential, 40% commercial now? We're used to be 80-20?
More or less.
And that's a trend I really like to see, because that helps us sustain our budget in the future. And which brings me to my next comment is we need to maintain our ability to provide these services that we provide to the citizens, and we need to do it in a sustainable manner. And this is coming out of the conversation I had last week with Jerry and Brian and everyone. And so I think we need to start planning and making some strategic decisions on how we're going to fund the services we have in other ways besides the general fund. Now's the time to do it, because in a couple of years the legislature may take that ability away from us, and then we'll be stuck. So I'm sure Jerry and Brian talked with you about those strategies, and I think we need to start talking about them sooner than later. I'm going to echo Councilman Hankin. I think the budget is fine the way it is. I think it's within 0.5% of our projections. I can't do that on my own checkbook, so I commend you guys for getting that close. But again, we need to start this long-term look at how we're going to do business in the future. And one of those is maintaining our facilities. I think we need to go ahead and get those air handlers in the council chambers, and maybe do something similar to what we do with the paving assessment, and do it with, they call it facility condition assessments, where we look at the status of air handlers. We may have done that with Siemens, but roofs, building envelopes, things like that, and start planning for the day that we got to start maintaining that stuff. So with that, that's all I really had, and I want to thank you guys for setting this phone call up. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Keith. Well, I'm going to echo everything that's been said by everybody tonight, because everybody has brought up very good points. Our two new members jumping into a budget cycle like this in their first year is, it's always alarming when you look at it and you've never been through it, and it doesn't look like you're going to ever come out the other end, but we always come out the other end. So we have very capable staff watching over everything. In terms of some of the things we're rebuilding, those, and Keith, Steve, you guys will remember this. I mean, when the economy was crashing and we were just slicing and dicing and cutting, we can't forget how much of it was taken out of our staff. By eliminating positions, by having people doing 4 or 5 jobs, by not giving raises for years, by cutting 401k contributions. I mean, everyone forgets that one. I don't ever forget that one. There was millions and millions and millions, $10 million cut out of the budget from where we were at the height, and the amount of employees, how far down it went. And we've rebuilt it, but we're still not even back where we were. We used to have a $33 million general fund budget and 300 and something employees around here. 3 and change, I believe it was, at the height. So, we have to commend everybody for the job they do. There are things, though, that we have to start to look at as things tighten up, if things tighten up, let me rephrase, going forward. We have this health insurance costs that just keep going up. And it's an exceptional plan that we have, but, at some point in time, something's got to bend. 3% raises are great for everybody. Everybody deserves it. I look at that on top of what we did last year, and hopefully it's getting everybody closer to where they need to be. vehicle replacement fund. You know, years past, we used to keep vehicles much longer. Perhaps it's something that we can look at as we look at that scenario you presented over the next 5 years, where, you know, perhaps instead of replacing everything in a 4 to 5 year turn, it becomes a 6-year turn. I don't know what that saves. It might not save anything. I don't know the answer to that. But heck, when I first got here, there were 30-year-old vehicles floating around out in the parking lot, and Mike used to have to put his feet out to stop the police cars like Fred Flintstone does. But hey, it worked, right, Mike? So, and Drew used to get the hand-me-down police cars to use in Parks and Rec, and I'll never forget Doug driving down the road with all the plastic landscaping pipes sticking out the windows going down Mitchell Hammock Road, but it worked. So, you know, before we default to a position that taxes must be raised, I think we default to a position of, okay, we've got a few things here that maybe we can start to take a peek at. Keith brought up, you know, the districts. I mean, the lighting district is something, we've been talking about that since Bob Benkowski's days. I mean, and in all fairness to Bob, if everybody remembers how the budget was, those of us who were here will remember, it used to be just, you know, everything was just in the general fund. There was no silos whatsoever. Enterprise funds hardly existed back then. And you know, really Bob and Jerry kind of set everything up into an enterprise funds where you could just have the revenues for that, feeding that. And the lighting district was always something that Mr. Benkowski, Mr. Sieber, folks after that, Catherine, have always talked about, because it's a fairer way to pay for streetlights. You know, to just take $800,000 out of the general fund every year to pay the bill for the streetlights, if we had that district, which most municipalities have, I know we see a lot of tax bills, and you see them on there all the time. They're usually, 50, 75, depends on the area. But then you have a fund that does nothing but streetlights. Then it gives us the ability to possibly add streetlights where streetlights aren't currently, upgrade some of these older ones we have in the city. We really have to start, and I know it's like banging our heads against the wall, but we really got to start, and Patrick may be a great person to put on this, talking to Duke and talking to FPL, where, you know, if we start to upgrade to LED lighting, that we start to get a discount on the electric these things use. You know, I find it ludicrous that if we upgrade to it, that we still get charged the same for the electricity that they use.
I did not realize that's how it was.
That is
So
how
we're
it is.
charged, and how does that?
We're charged about, and I'm just going to throw a number out there, it's like, I don't know, I'm sure you
$10 a
guys
pole
know,
or
50
something?
bucks a pole, something like that. And that's the maintenance of the pole, the light, the bulb, not the pole, so to speak. They'll paint the bulbs. But if you replace that with an LED fixture, you're still charging the same money.
Okay, so we replace the bulbs, and they still charge us the same amount, or they replace the bulb.
No, they want us to replace
They want
the
us to,
bulb
so we,
currently.
okay. And then as some of these older light fixtures around town, they're going to reach their lifespan eventually. And if you take a cute light post in some of these neighborhoods and say, oh, now that we're in this, now we're going to put up a less cute one because you're a developer, you know, like we're going to need a better way to
That's a whole
I
nother
think.
discussion, but yeah, if there's a fund,
Yeah, if there's a fund, then
a
at least
separate fund that's all that fund
Track it,
does, then
yeah.
we can get, you know, a lot of times we still have, I mean, I know I get the emails only because everybody likes to email the mayor's office, but, you know, I'm missing it. You and I got one about moss growing out
Yeah,
of it or
moss
something.
grown on a lamp.
But we
lamppost.
get emails all the time, and I send them along to staff about, you know, we don't have a street light here, we don't have a street light there, my neighborhood's dark.
Yeah, it's not fair that I don't have street lights and somebody else does, but
Well, but then,
but then they get added. At least every time I've only once sent somebody.
it's usually the newer part of towns and the older part of
Yeah,
towns,
yeah.
because the newer part of towns, there are newer standards, and the subdivisions were built, so the developers put them in, and then they get dedicated to us, blah, blah, blah. But anyway, long story short, it's, Councilman Ritten's correct. I mean, we have to look at some of these fairer ways of paying for the services, as opposed to just saying it's an item in the budget, in the general fund, that gets shifted around. And just, you know, like with the park amenity that we have currently, you know, it's an enterprise fund. You know, it's either going to make money or it's not, and then that decision will be made later on what we do if it's not.
But that's not how we're treating them. That's my concern about a special lighting district, because we have a water sewer fund, but if there's extra, then there's these rules for how we can take the extra. So we could, if we created a lighting district, figure out ways to shimmy around the fees or the taxes. And is it a millage? Is that how that would work, or
I
would it be a
think they have
flat
to do
fee?
a study, right, Mr.?
They would have to do a study. And typically, when you develop those types of funds, like special revenue funds, the rules associated with those funds are much, much stricter than they are special revenue funds. I would have to defer to Lonnie and look at state statutes on those, but typically you can't, without some sort of a rational relationship, transfer money out of those funds to fund other causes.
So the special lighting district, or if we did like a special fire district, those would be on lockdown, kind of?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
But the water sewer and stormwater are a little bit different because they're fee-driven? Is that the distinction? Or maybe more information for the next meeting would be
Yeah,
the best way to go.
I
Well,
can't
well-
answer that question.
Talk to the folks who can answer the question, or Councilwoman. That way she has the answers. I mean, I'm sure we can find them and clarify how this all works. But anyway, with all that being said, I mean, we've done a great job. You know, we get through all of these things all the time. You know, number one is that we provide the services to our residents that they expect us to provide them for the dollars. I mean, that's got to be number one. You know, just some things that I notice out there that visually can be improved. You know, our landscaping of Oviedo on the Park. I mean, I realize it's a construction zone right now, but, you know, when we set that up 2, 3, 4 years ago with in-house crews, it was we expected Disney, and that's what we were promised. And if that's not what we're going to get, then perhaps outsourcing it to another group might be the answer. I don't know. You know, our medians, you know, taking care of the medians, making sure that what people see is maintained and what they use is maintained. Long Lake Park, the park equipment, you know, the softball fields, and I realize this is all part of these FERDAP grants, so that's why I'm glad that was brought up, because I didn't know that. You know, we have to just make sure that those services are kept for our citizens. You know, it's, you can break government down very simply. You know, you make people feel safe. Let me rephrase, you ensure that people are safe. You deliver them clean water, they flush the toilet, it goes away, and we pick up their garbage, and 98% of the folks can be pretty happy. But, you know, all of these other things that people have come accustomed to us delivering, we still have to deliver that, too. So that's all I've got. This has been very productive. Let's go to the gentleman on the phone. Bob, do you want to add anything since I started with you?
I'm okay with everything that's being said. I still just want to make sure that the development services position is looked at a little bit closer. But other than that, everything else I'm fine with. I just want to make sure we just kind of always keep our eyes on the horizon.
Okay.
That's it.
And you heard Mr. Cobb say that he was going to address that, did you not?
I did.
Okay.
Thank you.
All righty. Keith, do you have anything to add?
No, I'm good, thanks.
All righty. Councilwoman?
Hoping for more details on all the breakdowns and talking with staff, and thank you very much for all the directors who've called me back today and helped me better understand the capital improvement plan and the little bit of the budget I could get a glimpse at. But if you guys can't figure out how to liberate some money to make sure that we can capture the grants that we've already earned, I'd love to come up with some ideas for you.
When are the budget books coming out? Because that'll give her the breakdown.
July 24th.
July 24th, you're going to get something about that fat.
Hot diggity dog.
Yeah.
See every line.
That's right. You can read everything, and then after you've read it all, just explain it to us. How's that sound?
No.
Deputy Mayor?
All good. Good job.
Great. Mr. Cobb, Mr. Boop, anybody have anything to add?
No, sir.
Nick, how's the golf course doing? Good. Well, that's
How many rounds a week? Give us some numbers and stuff.
Come on up here.
I want to be excited about the golf
Yeah,
course.
give us a quick P&L.
We're very early in the process still.
We understand that. Just tell us where you're at.
We were a little down from our April numbers in both April and May. June was significantly better than budget. Course conditions have gotten good quite quickly. And
It's amazing what a little bit of work will do.
there's been a little bit of work. The guys have worked really hard on it, long days, and the weather helps too when you get a little rain. Sometimes too much, but it definitely helps get some of the products we're applying full benefit.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman?
I just want to say, was that Nick talking?
That's
Yes.
Nick. Yes, it is. Sorry.
Going to say I played there twice last week. The course is in great shape. My score isn't, but the course is. So just keep the good work up.
Thank you. Appreciate that. We're doing more with marketing. I'm working with the staff so that they're always thinking of trying to produce revenue. We're always looking at rates, always putting out specials. I forwarded a couple of those to Brian today just so he can see it.
When do you anticipate... Let me get the microphone. Sorry, Barbara. When do you anticipate having enough done that we could do the big community open house that we had talked about way back at the beginning of this?
I envision that being October. When
Cooler weather.
When
Okay.
so we're finished with the bunkers and the irrigation. It's also the time of year where the locals come back out of hibernation from the heat
Play golf.
in the
okay.
summertime. Yeah, so I really think that's a nice opportunity for
And we'll
us.
do a nice big open house, and
Absolutely.
but there won't be any rounds that day, or there may, but we'll have it open so folks can go out, see it, look at it, enjoy it, something along those lines.
Yeah, I wouldn't not have the rounds as well, but there's we'll do some food and beverage and welcome everybody in, talk about everything that's been done, everything that's going to be done.
Okay. Well, we'll talk about the logistics of it.
Yeah.
Just wanted to make sure it wasn't forgotten.
Not forgotten. No, it's an important. It's an important
And
step
walking
for
the
us.
course for me is like the thing. To not have rounds that one day, I think is a really important thing just to let people enjoy it. And I would love to figure out, there's got to be a graph over time, maybe in a year. I don't know how much data we need to figure out what day of the week people play the least on and how we can every day not play that day and let it be used by everybody. It's just a general park.
It's my job, in addition to making sure we hit expenses, is revenue generation, and that's what this thing is lacking. So I'm
So
open to all those
you
things.
need data.
It'll be
and,
up.
okay.
It'll be up to you all, but there's a price for
Absolutely.
all these things. If we decide to do a golf event at no charge, we're I think going to talk about foot golf a little later. Also, there's costs involved, so I'm fine with whatever you all want to
Any
do.
day a fixed asset isn't generating revenue is a day you're losing money. I get it.
Yeah.
But the parks, as a general rule, they only produce, 30, 35 cents on the dollar for what we invest. So if the golf course is doing better than that and we look at it like a park, I don't know, there's a point at which it
Well,
might
it's a
make
little
sense.
contradictory what you've been
I know
saying.
it is, but if
Because-
I'm trying to jump on the train and get excited and think about it more as a
Well,
park than as a...
don't excoriate the money we're spending in order to generate the revenue, and then say you'd be okay losing the revenue.
Well, it depends on if we're going to treat it as something that only a few people could use or something that everybody has access to, whether or not they have special equipment and clothing.
Okay, how about the value it brings to the community?
I think a
How
giant
about the
300 acres of empty land is fantastic, whether it's a golf course or a park.
That's true. And it's not homes.
Yeah.
Anyway, Nick, go right ahead.
Budget for next year, I don't anticipate any changes from what's been presented already. So I think we stick with that. It's not an easy home run to hit this thing, but with the money that's going into this property, I think we have a good chance to.
I see
Go on
people
the other
buzzing
side.
about it a little bit in social media. Are you starting to get that buzz and that feedback?
Every day. Every day. The question is how fast that turns into revenue.
Do you have enough funding to give it a good try? Like, what what you've been allocated? It's like 1.1 million or something. Is
Yeah.
that enough to do everything in the right amount of time?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, I think.
Just making sure.
I feel very fortunate that we're able to pull off these projects this summer, because if we had delayed those, it would have hamstrung us a little bit
Right.
and lengthened the process to turn the thing around.
Okay, great. Any other questions for Nick?
Well, when you get, I don't
Deputy
know,
Mayor?
and I don't know if he's still on, but, when Keith tells you that that course looks good, I mean, Keith is a phenomenal golfer and has played there for a very long time and is excited about it. That tells me that when other professionals come out and see it, they're going to be excited too. Most people who don't play golf, they don't realize it, but that was actually a very telling comment from him, because I know how much he knows that course, and he saw massive improvements, so that's a good thing.
Well, I would
You also have a deputy chief over there who's a pretty good golfer.
There you go.
I would add to that, when we first got in there, I would not have brought my friends there to play it.
Yeah.
I would bring them there now.
Yeah.
How about, as these improvements go along, we get closer to, you really have a story to tell, we've got to get UCF out there and give them a tour and see what's been done, see if we can get them.
They're noticing,
Good.
so it just needs to keep getting a little better.
In all of our conversations, Brian and I and yourselves, I mean, they're looking for us to prove the concept. I know what they're looking for us to do before they make any commitment or anything. But if we can just get them to start sending their tournaments there, that's a lot of revenue. Remember they told us they run like 70-something tournaments a year, or some crazy number amongst all their departments.
I know they do a lot, and the other thing with the place getting in better shape, there's tea time wholesalers out there that run a lot of business through this area in the wintertime. They wouldn't have touched it last winter. This winter.
Have anybody from UCF been out there to see any of these improvements yet?
Well,
that,
they have their facilities still there.
The coaches are in and out of there.
No, I mean, not to play any tournaments or anything. Nothing yet. They're just doing their
Yeah,
practicing.
not yet on alumni type events and things.
That's what I meant,
you're
yeah.
referring to.
Right.
The tournament seasons tend to be spring and fall. So once people understand that, we had an event last week with numerous people that had been there before. They were all extremely happy with what they saw, but there was also a bunch of guys in their group that didn't come because they'd promised themselves they would not play there anymore.
Yeah, so the
Because
word's
what
got to
they've seen in
spread
the
now.
past.
Hey, wow, this is
Yeah,
much
so-
better.
Just got to get that
Word will
sand
travel.
in the sand trap, I hear.
Word will travel.
Good. Well, great job. Any other questions? Bob, do you have any?
No, I'm good. I was just, I think I had brought it up a little while back. I would really like to see some sort of, either quarterly or some sort of just reporting, like financial reporting, for the golf course, just to kind of see where we're at and where we're at to budget.
Can we provide quarterly
I'll get-
P&Ls?
I'm a little slow
Balance
on that,
sheets?
frankly, but yes, I'll get that
I
provided.
mean, a balance sheet would be telling.
Okay.
Cool.
Great.
Very good.
Nick, thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else from anybody, staff? Mr. Cobb? No, Mayor. Mr. Boot?
No, sir.
You good?
I'm good.
All righty. Well, with that all being said, it is 7:03. We want to thank everybody for all of their hard work on this budget. I'm sure there'll be more discussions going forward. There was information asked for, if we can get that provided for the members in a
And-
timely manner.
Oh, Mr. Mayor, if I could add one thing, I almost forgot. Hoping that at the next meeting, we can have a discussion item about our charitable policy and how staff time may be used for raising money for nonprofits and how those nonprofits are selected. 'Cause I'm not sure, how the Relay for Life golf tournament works, if that's donated staff time or if it's reimbursed from whatever's donated to Relay, how that works. But as we're trying to tighten up the budget, that's something I think that's worthy of looking at.
Well, let me give you a little history how that all came about. Back in Mr. Sieber's day, he was looking for a cause that the staff could rally around. And if I remember correctly, there was a small committee put together, and they chose Relay for Life for the entire staff to rally around. And that's how Relay for Life was chosen. And I mean, over the years, what have we given them? $100 and something thousand?
$200,000 over 8 years.
How much is it, Drew, that the checks we've donated to them? Yeah, I think the last check we gave them last summer was
30 or something.
120 total or something.
It was 20,000 last year, it put us over 100,000 for the consecutive, I think for the last 5. If you go back to 2004, which we started,
Right. When
There was an optimistic article in the Oviedo Winter Springs Life that put it like 200.
Yeah, if you go back to 2004, the initial years, I wasn't completely involved in the first few years.
Right, because it was like a staff committee doing it.
Well, and police kind of headed that up with other staff members.
that's right.
With other staff members, because we actually did the walk.
Right, we had
in
the
early-
teams, and we had the
Yes.
Jeans Friday, and
Yes.
we had and we used this, we had the walk on some of our properties at some point in time, if I remember.
We actually had it at the gym one year, and actually, after the year we had at the gym, staff participated one additional year after that in doing the walk, and then after that, we kind of dissolved that, and we just kind of have done the in-house, the golf tournament, and we're still doing the Gene. Cheesesteak for life. We've done baskets before. We've done multiple things at when staff sets up for events, at other events, we've done fundraisers at our events and things like that, information things. Actually, at different things, we've actually had people tip for things, which tips actually go to Relay for Life and that type of thing. So in the last 5 years, I got involved basically in 2009, and that's when we started doing the golf tournament in 2009. And then I think since 2009, I think we've done over the $100,000.
Right, because we used to do the ball drop.
Yes.
Used to set off the cannon to do the start until everybody started complaining.
We've done fireworks
Big
and things like
explosion
that.
was.
Yes.
And the DJs.
Yep.
So. Well, Bob, Keith, does anybody want to have a further discussion on our continuation of Relay for Life?
I don't have a preference.
One at a time. Bob first.
Go ahead, Keith.
Keith first.
I just put a potato chip in my mouth. You go first, Bob.
Oh, okay. No, I want to continue Relay for Life. So whatever we've been doing, I think we need to continue doing. So I'm good with what we're doing right now. So.
All right.
Are we subsidizing the process in any way, or are we taking out staff time?
I understand. I got
Okay, I'm just...
Keith, how are you doing? You done with your potato chip?
I'm good with the way it is.
All right. Deputy Mayor?
What's your concern?
I'm not comfortable with the taxpayers subsidizing charitable giving, especially in a lean budget year. If we're going to do that, there's special needs kids who do not have any program. There are older people who keep asking for Tai Chi at Oviedo on the Park. There are a lot of really excellent local causes where we will see the return on the investment in a much more tangible way. So if we're going to devote staff time to raising $20,000, $30,000 a year, I'd like to see it here. We've got like the art fund or whatever. Didn't we create like Friends of Oviedo or something to do whatever we need done? Why don't we have fundraisers for Friends of Oviedo?
Well, I think in being a great city, I think we have to be a giving city, and, honestly, the staff has picked that as their choice. I hear where you're going, but, for me, I'm going to leave it up to the staff. They've been involved for so many years. Relay for Life is great. I mean, there's lots of worthy ones, but, we've been doing it forever. And there are times when people come up and they ask for some help from the city, and we'll do it up to, sending kids places and stuff, 500 here, 500 there. But I think
We do that?
Not anymore.
Okay.
We use-
Well, I don't remember us doing that anymore.
We used to. But-
We used to have a discretionary fund for the council
Yeah, we used
back a little bit where we would do that, but that got whacked out of the budget.
Yeah.
In the lean years.
Yeah, we did, but
As did the pot of money we used to have that people used to apply for. I think that.
the work, I remember the first one I did, Relay for Life, the first one I think was in 2005 that I went to, and American Cancer Society, all of that, they're all worthy. I hear where you're going, but the staff is so invested in it. It's been, how long has it been, Drew? It's been 12 years.
2004 since they started.
So about right when I
2004.
12, 13 years. I would leave it for now. I hear your point, but I don't want to, like, walk away from it. We've committed, they depend on it, and hopefully they're saving some people. But you're right. How do we disperse it to others? Conversation for another day.
And, whether we can get the buy-in to raise that kind of money for others. I mean, a lot of it is because it's American Cancer Society that you're able to get some of these bigger sponsors to write bigger checks.
I don't know. I think Public Services would give a check to anybody you suggest. I think a lot of these people whoever the city was supporting would be supported.
On certain years, it's been, I will tell you, the year we actually did the grand opening for the event center with the amount of staff hours that went towards trying to raise fundraising for the event center, our sponsorships for Relay actually went down that year. Because
they were diverted.
In this town, we hit a lot of the same people for multiple layers of sponsorship, annually. And so it's, kind of, this year's...
How many times have we heard that everybody runs when Drew calls?
Hey, I would just say this, just to close.
Only because they know you're going to ask them for money.
Yeah.
I would just say, just to close, I appreciate very much that you, and when you get the budget book, don't give her a budget book this year.
Give me one a few days early so I can ask
Then you're going to see all the line items, and I appreciate it because I still do it. You look through each line, you say, where can we cut? But I would just say the general tone, what I'm hearing from Bob and Keith and from you and all of us, is that this year we're good. What do I say, Brian? Are we done? Are we good? Every year. We're good. There's going to be a time you're going to sit here, and he's going to come in here and go, we're not good. And these conversations and things you're bringing up all become that much more relevant at that time. And then you got to start saying, all right, well, look, I can't give $100,000 here, I can't do it here, but why you could do it, you do it. And the years of the Gestrick years, those were the years you're talking about. I mean, everything was...
You wouldn't have liked that.
You wouldn't. That's not fun either. It's fun to have stuff, and it's also fun to have a reputation as a giving and caring city. And you pick and choose your stuff. So... But I think we're good this year. Just ride the wave.
Do we have an answer to that question, though, about whether staff time is deducted from the contribution or not?
No, it's not.
It is not.
But I will tell you, primarily since I've been doing the golf course, most of the time is mine and my admin assistant of sending out letters, notices, and things like that. A lot of the time that's put in is exempt staff hours, and not all of it's done during work hours. A lot of it's done after hours. With me making phone calls, me picking things up after hours.
Each department makes a basket.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and it's other staff. I mean, it's not just the golf tournament. It's all the other items that staff does, like wearing, paying $5 to wear jeans on Fridays. That's something that all staff across the city does. Different departments, we've done baskets in the primary cost of staffing is the day of the event. Is the actual golf tournament. When we normally have about 10 staff members besides the exempt staff members that work the event, about 10 staff members that sometimes work. We try to get volunteers, but we can't always get volunteers for everything, nor do we need volunteers, taking money and things like that. We have to have controls on that type of thing also.
Well, what do you guys think about letting staff every year vote, nominate anonymously so nobody feels like they're ditching one organization over another, or it's just anonymously for many reasons, and let everybody just sort of vote on it, maybe by email or SurveyMonkey or whatever we can, just to make sure that everybody's on board with this American Cancer Society idea. Well, they're doing it just because they've always done it, with nobody ever getting a chance to say, well, I like the Diabetes Association.
But there was a committee put together that decided.
In 2004. There's been a lot of staff change since then. If it's something everybody loves, then stick with it, but I think it would be invigorating to give people a chance to maybe change directions.
Has there been any staff members saying they want to change directions, Mr. Cobb?
I haven't heard anything.
Okay.
It hasn't been presented.
Well, I mean, that's up to you guys.
You know what? That's not up to the council. That's up to the staff.
Yeah, whatever makes staff happy.
This was a team building exercise put together by Mr. Sieber to get the staff all involved in a charitable organization. And if I remember, when they came in and you all told us which one you had chosen, one of the reasons it was chosen is because cancer affects everybody. Right. And it was You weren't picking and choosing amongst someone's favorite. You were picking and choosing a big one.
Broad
Broad
Yeah.
problem. So let's, if anybody wants to, on the staff, if that comes up, then you guys decide what you want to do and come in here and tell us what you're doing. This is your time, and this is all about the staff putting it together.
Hey, just remember, real quick, the city has a lot of tools. If we get in a bind, and let me tell you, those gastric years, I mean, Rich was fine. I mean, just the economy and the time. We had a lot of tools to make it work, and now I think we even have more tools. So, all these dire predictions and things like that. That's why, you'll remember when we did the first budget meeting, and you and Bob saw that deficit, and you were like, oh my God, I mean, him and I just didn't say nothing.
We didn't even blink.
We were just like, okay, we've seen this before, this movie, we know the ending, and the ending is it's balanced and things are good. But if just so you sleep better at night, and maybe Bob, because he's just here, if we have a problem, there's so many tools to balance and make things right. So
You should have been here when the $5 million deficit was up.
Yeah, that was fun.
That 1 year we had to do it. That's when that was when Governor Christ cut everyone's millage, and we had no choice. I mean that one we walked in and the number was up there, and it was just like, hey, that's the number. I don't know if it was quite $5 million, but it was big.
Yeah, but we get there. All right, bro.
Alrighty. With all that being said, anything else for the good of the order? Keith, Bob, you okay?
Good. I'm good. I'm good. Thanks. Good meeting, guys. Appreciate it.
Alrighty. Well, Keith, you're off work. Bob, are you on vacation?
I am. I'm up in North Georgia.
Well, you go enjoy your family. Keith, are you still in Alabama or Mississippi? Where are you?
I'm actually staying in Louisiana, working in Mississippi.
Well, there you go. Well, be safe, have fun, and meeting is adjourned.
All right. Thanks, guys.